Good evening and welcome. It's now 6 o'clock and I'm going to hand over to Dr. Dix. Thank you, Dr. Dix.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this session. My name is Tinus Dix. As Renier introduced me, I'm a clinical hematology fellow and a committee member of SARA. Now, for those who don't know, SARA is a special interest group of the South African Medical Association with the aim of improving the lives of professionals, of registrars in a professional and academic capacity. As such, we conducted a survey at the end of 2023, which showed that the MMED research project needs, or people conducting the MMED research project need support both in terms of the time that gets dedicated to the research project and other means of support. So this series really seeks to address the latter aspect of the issues raised by the survey. Our first webinar happened 2 weeks ago, and that was on choosing a research topic. If you missed that, I highly encourage you to go to the SARA podcast page where you will be able to review that session. So this series that we are conducting currently will culminate in an all expenses paid registrar writing retreat, which will happen in July. Application for this weekend will be open soon, so please keep an eye open for that. During this registrar writing retreat, there will be a great deal of support made available to registrars in performing their research. And they will also have access to biostatisticians, etc. So the hope really is that you can make significant progress with your MMED research project during that time. Today, however, we'll be looking at some basic research methods, as this is our second webinar for 2024. And one of the main purposes behind the MMED is really to expose specialists or would-be specialists coming, people who are specializing or are going to be leaders in their fields, to the different research methods, to understand research and critically acclaim research in their field, so that whatever field you are specializing in, you will become a leader in your field and able to critique the new knowledge that grows within that particular area, and you can practice sound evidence-based medicine. So with that being said, a very quick introduction, but I would like to hand over to our first speaker, who is Dr. Monique Mohale. She is a public health medicine registrar at the National Institute of Occupational Health, which is a division of the National Health Laboratory Services at Sefako Health Sciences University. Her interests include health policies, leadership, management, and public health law and ethics. Dr. Mohale, we are delighted to have you as our first speaker tonight. Thank you for joining us, and I'll hand over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you once again for joining, and a big thank you to Dr. Dix for that introduction. As mentioned by Dr. Dix, this evening we will be discussing an approach to some of the basic research methods that are available to us. And just before we start, I would just like us to remember that, as mentioned by my colleagues 2 weeks ago in our first webinar, that the approach that one takes when embarking upon a research project ought to be tailored to and informed by the research question that one is seeking to address or seeking to answer. And it is crucial that when one chooses a research question, that it is one that is not only feasible, but also one that is practical within the context of our registrar time and various competing activities within the program, such as supervising students, service deliverables, and just life in general. And this is just a brief outline of what it is that we hope to be discussing this evening. Okay. Apologies about that. My screen was just not moving. So in deciding on a research question within our individual field, one can apply the finer criteria to ask ourselves, is my research question feasible? Is it interesting? Is it novel? Is it ethical? And is it relevant? And then having decided on a research question, one can then move to deciding on the particular research methodology that would be most applicable or most appropriate in addressing our research question. And we will just briefly discuss the three common or the three most basic research methodologies commonly applied. The first of which being quantitative research methodology. There seems to be a bit of a delay with my slides moving, but I will continue. So quantitative research methodology essentially is a systematic inquiry in which involves the collection and the analysis of numerical data in the description of characteristics, in assessing and finding correlations or testing hypotheses or causal relationships. And an example of quantitative research would be if we had a research question such as what was or what is the demographic makeup or composition of South Africa in the year 2023. And quantitative research provides objective and often generalizable evidence that makes it a valuable tool in informing public health policies, interventions, as well as appropriate resource allocation. The next methodology that we will be discussing would then be qualitative research methodology, which is a systematic inquiry, which involves the collection and the analysis of non-numerical data in seeking insights into the lived experiences, perceptions, opinions of individuals, and essentially which then allow for a researcher to explore the complexities of human behavior, and it can be used to gather more in-depth insight into a problem, or as well as in the generation of new hypotheses. And then an example of qualitative research, I actually had one on my slide, but it would be this particular study where they had conducted sort of in-depth interviews amongst 4 different surgical subspecialties. They chose 15 surgeons, and they did interviews, conducted interviews amongst these surgeons to obtain their subjective experiences in dealing with adverse events. And qualitative research methodology plays a vital role in understanding public health issues and concerns from a personalized or an individualized perspective, and thus allows for the evaluation of healthcare programs as well as the exploration of sensitive public health topics, including sexual and reproductive health, mental health, as well as issues surrounding discrimination within healthcare settings. I do apologize, colleagues. I just don't know why my slides are not moving.
Dr. Mwale, try the mouse and see if you can click it forward and backwards.
Okay, sorry about that. Arinir, are we okay now? Is it moving?
Yeah, we can see it on this side. Thank you, Dr. Mwale.
The next and last research methodology that we will then be discussing is that of mixed methodology, which seeks essentially to bridge the divide by combining elements of both quantitative as well as qualitative research, and in so doing provides a more comprehensive understanding of a complex issue or more complex research questions. And they also allow for a more complete picture than either methodology mentioned before individually, as they seek to integrate the strength of each study. An example of a mixed method study would example be if we had a question surrounding the occurrence of motor vehicle accidents within a specific area or within a specific population. The quantitative aspect of such a study would seek to look at establishing what the prevalence in terms of the numbers are of motor vehicle accidents within the specific area. And the qualitative aspect of such a research would then seek to establish what the perceptions of the individuals in the affected area are as it pertains to the timing of the motor vehicle accidents, what they're noticing. Are their cars speeding more or less at certain times? Are there certain streets that are busier than others, for example? And due to the comprehensive nature of mixed method studies, they do play a crucial role in the development of various health promotion strategies. So now, having decided on our research question and having established the most appropriate research methodology, we then need to decide which study design would be most applicable and most appropriate in helping us address our research question. And just some of an overview or some of the common studies designs that are applied when one is conducting quantitative research is what is currently on our screens. And essentially, epidemiological studies are divided into descriptive or analytic studies. Descriptive studies seeking to provide more insights into the characteristics of an idea or a topic of interest. And analytical studies being where most of us find ourselves when we are conducting research. And analytical studies further are divided into observational studies, which allow for the exploration of associations and potential causal relationships between exposures or risk factors and health outcomes in the absence of or without any intervention or influence on any of the variables under investigation. And the types of observational studies include cross-sectional studies, in which data is collected on exposures or risk factors and health outcomes at a single point in time, essentially providing us with a snapshot of the situation within a population at any specific moment or point in time. And cohort studies observing a defined group of individuals, be they exposed or unexposed to particular factors over time. And cohort studies can either be prospective or they can be retrospective. And case control studies looking at two existing groups or individuals who differ in terms of outcome and are compared on the basis of a suspected causal exposure. The other branch of analytic studies is then experimental studies, of which randomized control trials serve as the gold standard for establishing or investigating cause and effect relationships. And in contrast to our observational analytical studies, experimental studies are defined or characterized by the presence of an intervention or an influence on study variables in order to assess the impact on an outcome. Some of the common types of study design that is applied when one is conducting qualitative research involve the following. We have phenomenological research, which seeks to explain phenomena through the subjective lived experiences of individuals. We have ethnographic research, which involves a researcher immersing themselves within a group, within the context of a group to understand their culture, their exposure, or their experiences. Narrative research, interpreting experiences and stories in a bid to understand how it is that people make sense of their experiences and their perceptions. Grounded theory, seeking to collect data in a bid to establish new theories or new ideas. And action research, linking theory and practice so as to drive innovation and change. So, having decided on our research question, our appropriate research methodology, and complementary study design, there are various means by which one can go about collecting data. And this typically can include surveys, which would involve the distribution of questionnaires either in person, online, or telephonically. This may involve conducting interviews, having one-on-one conversations with participants. It can involve observations in which the behavior or the occurrence of an outcome of interest is monitored within its natural setting and then recording what one hears or sees or experiences. You can also turn to focus groups that are conducted amongst of a group of people in which we are interested. Secondary data, which may already be in existence within our various departments and may have been collected for a different purpose, but then can be used to address our particular research question. And this is something that needs to be considered when one is deciding upon a research question as well. And then finally, also conducting experiments in which we seek to control independent variables in order to measure their effect on dependent variables. It is important to remember that regardless of the research methodology, regardless of the study design, and regardless of the means by which we are to collect data, these all have their associated pros and cons, which also we need to be considered within the context and consideration of the research question that we are seeking to address. And then just lastly, conducting research can be overwhelming. It can seem like it's a daunting challenge. However, we need to perhaps just adjust our perspective and seek to manage our expectations. We need to remember that as great as it would be for our research to be immediately impactful or for our research to immediately bring about great change, right now we are not seeking to reinvent the wheel, and we may need to be a little bit more practical, and we may need to just sort of manage our expectations in terms of what it is that we are able to do within this limited time that we have to conduct our research projects. We might need to look at things such as keeping it relatively simple by sticking to conducting quantitative research, by choosing to choose cross-sectional study designs or even retrospective cohort studies, provided that the data is available and does indeed address our specific research question. And in so doing, we make the task of conducting our research project a lot more palatable and a lot more pleasant for the time that we have. Thank you all so much, and I do apologize for the earlier glitch with my slides not moving. Thank you.
Dr. Mohale, thank you so much for that presentation, for giving us, I think, a very good overview of the different research methodologies. We have a minute or two left on our program before I introduce the next speaker. But I see he's sharing his slides already, so maybe I'll just continue on straight to him. So our final speaker for tonight is going to be Prof. Stephen Machiba. So he is an associate professor and head of clinical department at orthopedics at the University of the Free State. He's also the chairperson of SAMA Free State branch and a member of the SAMA EST committee. He was previously a HPCSA evaluator, intern evaluation committee member, and presently serves on the HPCSA preliminary committee. He's also the recipient of various certificates and awards from the Vembe District, Capricorn District, Limpopo Health Department, the Rural Doctors Association of Limpopo, SAMA, and acknowledgement from both the HPCSA, the National Minister of Health, and the state president for outreach that he has conducted in Limpopo. He's formed part of the team that did the first robotic-assisted knee surgery in the rural hospital, in rural Limpopo Hospital. So definitely a man, I think, that is worth listening to. Prof. Stephen, we welcome you to this panel, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you.
Prof, I think you're still muted on your side. Prof Machiba, you're still muted. Prof, just unmute yourself. We can't hear anything that you're saying. Dr. Dix, it looks like Prof Machiba has got a problem.
Sorry for that. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Thank you, Prof.
Rainier, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Thank you.
Hello, Rainier?
I can hear you, Prof.
We can hear you clearly, Prof. Please
Hello?
share your slides. You can share your slides, Prof, and
Dr.
go ahead.
Dix,
We
can you hear me?
clearly. I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
I think he's got a connection problem because it's frozen on my side.
Prof, we can hear you. We can hear you clearly. I hope your sound isn't muted on your side, but we can hear you. So if you're ready, you can
Okay.
share your screen.
All right. Okay. Apologies for that technical glitch. Okay. Can you hear me now?
We can
Prof,
hear
yes, we
you,
can.
but
Can we go on?
I can't see the presentation on my side. Dr. Dix, can you see it on your end?
I can't yet see it.
Dix?
I can't yet see the presentation, Prof. Might just be connectivity issues on your side. Maybe we'll just give it 2 seconds. Hopefully it will appear shortly.
Yeah.
Prof, are you able to see your slides on your side?
Okay. Can you see it now? Because
there's nothing on my side yet, unfortunately.
I'm sharing the screen, yeah?
Yeah, we have a message that says you've started screen sharing, but unfortunately, I just have a black screen.
Yes, I can see this slide from my side, and it says I'm sharing here. You can see now.
And unfortunately, not.
Could be connective. Yeah, it could be connective because it says I'm sharing this side. So let me just go out completely and start all over.
Prof, if you've got problems presenting on your side, maybe you could just present your slides without showing it on the screen. Just enable your camera and your mic.
Okay. Yeah, because I can see my slides and it says sharing here. So I don't know what is happening on your side. Hopefully it will. So what I'm sorry, it can show that with Dr. Mohali, we communicated during the week, and so I've got a little bit more detail. So this is can be available to everyone if you want to go through it, because I'm covering from introduction to a research proposal.
Prof, sorry for the interruption. Can you maybe enable your video on your side?
Yeah, I have enabled the video.
There's nothing coming through on my side.
Okay. Because we tried it earlier, everything was fine. So
just click on the little camera at the bottom. At the bottom left, there should be a camera.
Yeah. Yeah, I have it's enabled.
Yeah, it's unfortunately not showing on this side. If we're having problems with that, you have to continue without the camera as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in the interest of time, Prof, you're welcome to continue, and then hopefully something will kick in as you go along. But please go ahead with your presentation. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So the contents that I wanted to cover after discussing with Dr. Mohali, I didn't change anything, though some of the things could be a repetition, but repetition is good. So the objective of this talk is just to help you guys understand the research design and methodology and apply these concepts in your own research. So research methodology, especially in postgraduates, that is very important. A well-designed project will lead to more accurate results and can potentially influence policy or practice. Whereas a poor research design, you will end up with inaccurate findings, and you may end up with also ethical issues with your research committee. So we follow a research philosophy which influence how we define our research question, how we collect and analyze data, and how we interpret our findings. And that different types of research philosophies, unfortunately, you can't be able to see them because of the glitches. I talked about positivism, interpretivism, and realism. And then just went on to talk a little bit more about that, but in the interest of time. So how do you identify research problems to address in your study? It could be a specific issue with a patient care. It could be difficulties that you're experiencing, for example, lack of massage and theater time, or lack of supporting staff. It could be a gap in the knowledge that you want to add in to the existing knowledge. You may find that some projects haven't been talked much about. You might actually even find that you are the first person who's talking about a particular issue. Or you could be repeating what somebody has found in another area in the first world, and then you do it in the third world, or even within the same circumstances. You want to make sure that can you find the same results which the other person, for example, is in Joburg, Jen, and a person who's somewhere in George Mukari. You do the same research topic and find out if you come to the same conclusion. And this is identified through a variety of ways. Literature review, which is very important, and then your experience, your supervisor's experience, and also societal issues. For example, at the moment we have a gender-based violence issue, and we are about to publish from our side a paper on gender-based violence, musculoskeletal injuries through gender-based violence. Because it is a topical issue and it's a problem. So this is how you identify your research. And your literature review may highlight unforeseen issues. You may find that the effects of social media, for example, on mental health. Most studies will focus on negative impacts, whereas there's very little research on potential positive effects. And then this gap in the literature could form the basis of your research problem. As I mentioned earlier, your professional experience, your teacher might observe something, and then observation could lead to a research problem. For example, what teaching strategies can increase student engagement in a classroom? I've tried to stay away from examples of surgery or orthopedics. So societal issues I've mentioned, like gender-based violence. So your research, once you have identified a research problem, it can be transformed into one or more research questions. A research question is clear, focused, concise, complex, and arguable. And then you can then use hypotheses as potential answers to your research questions. And the answers can be based on existing theories or knowledge. So then you come to research design. This is the strategy chosen to integrate different components of your study. And it has to be done in a coherent and logical way. And it constitutes the blueprint for the collection, measurement, and analysis of data. And it aligns your research objectives with your research methods, so that you it ensures effectiveness in your study. So I did put up a slide on the level of evidence, the studies from level 1 up to level 7. And the strongest will be your meta-analysis and systematic reviews, and the poorest, the case reports, opinion papers, and letters. So when you choose your studies, you have to be practical. If you're going to do a randomized control trials, just take into account that most of you have, within 2 years, you must send in your proposal to the ethics committee. And if you are going to do on a prospective study that is going to take 2-3 years, then you may find that you have chosen a wrong study. So most of the time, it's usually level 5 studies that are chosen by and quantitative, as indicated by Dr. Moal, retrospective studies, because especially if you have records. So I've mentioned about those level of evidence. You can read on your own. It's there on my slide. And then, so research design that Dr. Mwali touched a little bit on. For example, you have got experimental, she did mention quasi-experimental, descriptive, correlational, exploratory. And each design has its own strength and weakness, and is suitable for different type of research questions. So I've a little bit expanded on when can you use experimental design. This is when we want to establish a cause and effect relationship between the two variables. And then the researcher also controls other factors that might influence the outcome. Then we've got quasi-experimental. This is similar to experimental design, but it lacks the element of random assignment to treatment or control. A descriptive, used when the primary objective is to provide a detailed picture of a situation or a phenomenon. You've got correlational. So factors to consider when choosing a research design. It depends on the several factors. The nature of the problem, the research question. It may need your personal experience or a supervisor. And then you must ask yourself, who will be the audience for this research? Is it the general public? If you are in pediatrics, are you writing this to your colleagues or to the general public? It's also important, you need to decide if you are going to publish this paper, is it going to reach the audience that it was meant for? So your research topic should be specific, limited in scope, practical, and achievable with limited resource, such as time, which you don't have, as I mentioned earlier. So it must be SMART, and SMART standing for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. So don't try to be over ambitious. At the master's honors level, you are required to just show mastery of theories and concept of research design methodologies. Whereas at a doctoral level, you use the above master to do something novel. And then there's populations and sampling method that Dr. Maltok touched a little bit about. I just went a little more to define them. Definition of a population, which is a set of individuals or events in the interest in a study, and a sample, which is a subset of the population. And then findings from the sample are then generalized to the population. So there are different sampling methods. I've given examples of 5-year random sampling, stratified sampling, cluster, convenience, and purposive sampling. And each method has its own strength and weakness and is suitable for different types of research. So when choosing a sampling method, also depends on the resources, the degree of precision needed, the nature of your research question, and the size and diversity of the population. And data, it has been alluded earlier. It can be, I'll just add, there is primary and secondary data, also quantitative and qualitative. And then the primary data is where you gather directly by the researcher. For example, a questionnaire or a laboratory experiment. The data is known to the researcher. Data can be checked for errors. Whereas the secondary data is gathered by other researchers. So results, for example, published in academic journals. So that is, and the information is not collected by the researcher here. So using primary and or secondary data depends on your objective and the risk profile of the project. So she's mentioned about quantitative data earlier, which is expressed in numerical form, for example, ages, salaries, and the advantages of this is that it's more objective and statistical analysis and extrapolations can be made. It's easier to collect and sample size is often larger. And this is where majority of registrars will do their studies on. The problem is that not all this data can be reduced to the numerical form. You may miss important data, and sometimes if you use questionnaire, we know that we've seen that in the journals, there's low response rates for questionnaires, as low as 10%. but you still have to interpret that. So quantitative data she has mentioned, I just added the sub-classification of quantitative, categorical, ranked, interval, and ratio. Whereas if we talk about qualitative data, this cannot be reduced to numerical form. For example, people's thoughts, beliefs, or behaviors. It gives us the why behind their response. It exposes people's experience and understanding of the research question. The disadvantage is that it's subjective. Data analysis may be difficult, and you may be unable to apply statistical analysis to this. It's time consuming, and it depends also on the skills of the interviewer. And then she talked about the mixed method. We call that methodological triangulation. This is a combination of quantitative and qualitative to get advantages of each. By using different methodologies, the researchers can avoid flaws and biases that come with reliance on a single research technique. Data collection methods she has mentioned: surveys, interviews, observation, experiment, and document analysis. And I just added the interviews can be structured, semi-structured, and unstructured. And then focus group discussions, generally about 8 to 10 people. And the advantage that it saves time, large sample size. The problem is that people may not want to disclose sensitive information. And the problem is that those louder individuals may dominate. So you need to be skilled in managing that. Then she's covered experimental studies. There are different types, and then case studies as well. There are many types of case studies, but the problem is that the size is often small, and it may be limited in extent to which you can generalize your findings. Grounded theory, just adding to, so you go there, go in the world and collect data, and then you then construct a theory based on the data. This is the opposite of normal research. Then you test the data, like with the focus group. You can do modeling, and then the framework will be sequence of activities to develop the model. There's action research. It aims to simultaneously investigate and solve an issue often used in social sciences. Like, for example, a library can use the action research. It can track the frequency and type of books checked out by the students. Then this data can help improve library resources and services. The other method is ethnography that I saw that she had mentioned. You want to study a culture of a particular group of people. The researcher stays in the community and organization for a period of time before doing the research. So you've got an advantage on reporting on things from insider's perspective. The disadvantage is that it may affect timeframes, and forming personal relationships may introduce bias. And some people have complained that there's exploitation of communities. So there's forecasting. You try to predict what may happen in the future, maybe based on the historical data. There are longitudinal studies. There are cross-sectional studies that she had alluded a little bit before. I've just added a little bit more information on that. And then feminism is also a method that has been introduced, and which studies the effects of patriarchy as a system of women and men, and how this can be addressed to achieve women's empowerment. It's intersectional analysis, where you are analyzing multiple forms of oppression the individual may face. There's this hermeneutics. You want to look at, for example, analysis of a book published in 400 AD, and you want to understand the specific contextual factors that could have influenced it. There's discourse analysis. For example, women's fashion in South Africa in the 1950s, which is wider than hermeneutics. There's a desktop analysis, where you analyze all documentation policies, regulations in a systematic manner. The direct observation, your own account, often more accurate than reliance on others. The problem is that people may change their behavior when they know that they're being observed. There's a questionnaire, which fast assessment of a large sample, it's inexpensive, easy data analysis using statistics, and you can obtain both the quantitative and qualitative data here. The problem, as I mentioned earlier, it's a low response rate, and anonymity could be compromised. So there are pros and cons of each method. Surveys reach a large number of people and are cost effective. Interviews provide in-depth information and allow for clarification of responses. So what are the factors that you should consider when choosing a data collection method? Depends on several factors: the nature of your research problem, resource available, skills of the researcher, and the population you are going to do research on. So planning and conducting data collection, what is advised? Define what data will be collected, how will it be collected, where it will be collected, and who will collect that data. It may involve piloting the data collection instruments. You may have to train your data collectors, and also important to manage and store the data. You must ensure data quality integrity by checking the reliability and validity of the data collection instruments, and obviously maintain confidentiality and anonymity of the participants. So the different data analysis method, as we have mentioned, said before, and Dr. Mwali talked on qualitative, quantitative, and the mixed methods. And as I mentioned, depends on those factors. So lastly, I thought I should just touch a little bit on a research proposal. So this is the document that outlines the proposed study. It must have objectives, methodology, and shows why it's significant. This helps to plan the study. It may help you obtain approval or funding and communication of to the other. So the key components of research proposal is introduction, literature review, methodology, ethical consideration, budget, and you must have a timeline. So most of the universities now, they'll tell you must do this within the first 2 years of your registrarship. And tips for writing a compelling research proposal is to be clear and concise, show the study significance, demonstrate familiarity with the literature, and present a feasible methodology. And do it in a rigorous and ethical manner. Be honest and transparent, respect participant rights and dignity, and you must always acknowledge the work of others. So just a summary, what we have talked about is a research philosophy, design, the blueprint for conducting the study, including method collection methods, data collection procedures, data analysis strategies, and the research proposal. There was a tool that it's not showing, which we use in orthopedics, where we got the name, put the name of the registrar, and then there are different headings. First will be the person is thinking about the project. So we tick a box. It's got a research concept, which we discuss in a bigger meeting with everybody to see if this is feasible. Information on the topic you are doing, but don't be discouraged if the literature review is scanty, because you may be introducing a new concept. And then you must write your protocol, which has to be approved by HSREC or the Department of Health Ethical Committee. And then you collect your data. So we tick the boxes: data analysis, manuscript prepared, presented at a journal, or published, submitted, and marked. So we have that little table in the department, just to make sure that everybody is not left behind. And finally, we've got a toolkit. A toolkit is your resources, your basic research methodology books. I use a postgraduate research toolkit after attending a webinar on Winter School of Postgraduate Research. You can do this online, and you attend NAMA course. I think most of the universities organize a research course for the registrars, and some departments they organize it for themselves. So you need to always refer to that. You must, if you don't understand, you go back to your book and understand, and then relate it to your research. Thank you. My apologies that my slides could not show, but this will be available for anybody who wants to use them.
Prof, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us and really being able to take us quickly through all the major parts to consider when it comes to designing your study and thinking of the methods, thinking of the setting, data collection, data analysis, and the ethical considerations. You really were able to touch on everything. Apologies, yes, that the latter half of this webinar has been more in the format of a podcast. But we appreciate you staying with us. I am going to open the floor to Q&A in a moment. First of all, just remind you to please go into the chat and fill in the survey. The survey really helps guide SARA as to what the needs are of registrars, and so we can kind of tailor the product that we give you and the support that we give you specific to needs of our registrars. So please fill that in. It really does help us a great deal. Prof, maybe I'll just kick off the Q&A session by asking you a question, maybe posing something theoretical. So imagine I'm a new registrar. I'm starting in general surgery. I'm in KZN. It's busy, lots of trauma. I know I'm going to have a busy registrar time, and I don't really have an idea how I'm going to even start thinking about a MMED research topic, and I'm confused by what research, what study design is going to be a best fit for me. Would you have any advice for me in that instance?
I think, fortunately, maybe in most universities or institutions, the supervisors or your lecturers, your consultants, because they're required to produce a paper, 1 or 2 per year, they must also contribute to research. So my advice is, initially, I think the best is reliant on your supervisors, your leaders, your teachers, your head of department. If you've got a problem, you have if I can put it, a right to go to the head of department and say, I don't have a topic. But most of the places is you find people are consultants are competing that I don't have a student this year. So why am I excluded? So you got some areas where you find that your teachers also have to take part in. It's part of our progress rating that you must be involved in research. So I can understand when you are new, it's difficult, but my advice would be your teachers, or if you can't get help from your teachers, you must approach the head of the department. He has to facilitate that you get a topic, or he can give you the topic. But it's much better as everybody is involved, so that you don't have sort of one-sided research. I've got my likings and dislikes for issues that I like.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you so much for that response, Prof. I think you raise a valid point that we must remember as as registrars, we belong to a university, we pay university fees. So I think it is only fair to expect that there's a certain degree of support coming from our university. And yes, go to the people who are in the know, have supervised MMEDs before, and are able to guide you both in your interest and what is practically possible into time that you have available. Dr. Muhali, I don't know if you want to add anything before we enter the Q&A, anything you want to add to what Prof has said?
Thank you, Dr. Dix, and thank you, Prof. I think if we are going to make it practical in the example that you've given us in the busy emergency department, we would have to, again, like I said, look at means of keeping it simple and in liaison with your supervisor, as Prof has suggested. You know, a lot of, and most emergency departments do collect data, even if it's merely in the form of their patient register, and there is a lot of data that is available, and finding something that is already there that could maybe just be tailored to answering a specific question, perhaps something like waiting times for the different priority levels, or something that is readily available can be turned into a research project. It's merely just looking in the right places and answering the right question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that answer. So
And
I'll open the floor
to add there.
Prof, please do. Please do.
Dr. Dix, if I may add. I think one of the things that delays registrars, as you say, is the support. So the advice now is that choose 2 supervisors, at least, you know, one main supervisor and a co-supervisor, so that when you struggling, that's would be my advice. We've seen a lot of students stuck because their supervisor is very busy with other things.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that response, Prof. I think this is something that came up in our webinar a fortnight ago, where we specifically mentioned when you have a supervisor, maybe drafting a memorandum of understanding so that you are covered as a registrar, that your supervisor is covered, you know what to expect from one another, and at least there's something in writing that you can fall back on as a supplementary way of preventing the situation where you have a very busy supervisor who might not be able to come back to you in what you deem to be a reasonable amount of time. There was a hand up by Tanzi Litole. I would ask if you could just, if you have a question, just put it in the Q&A box, and then I will go through them and our panel can answer them. We have a question here from Setsopo Mesamola, who says, from what Prof said in his presentation, is it possible to take an already established research and make it into a new one based perhaps on one's catchment area? So I think the question is here, you know, there's research done at the University of Cape Town, there's a specific research question. Is it possible to copy and paste that into, say, Bloemfontein or Universitas catchment area? What are your thoughts on that, Prof?
Yes, I think it is possible. You may add additional local information because, for example, if the example you are giving Bloemfontein and Cape Town, let's just maybe not a good example, but the amount of gunshots that you see in Cape Town compared to the in Bloemfontein, we can say, you know, theoretically maybe it's gang related in Cape Town, but whereas the gunshots that we get in Bloemfontein probably it's personal issues or robbery. so you can do the same research because you may be under different circumstances, and it may add a body of knowledge from that perspective. You could find that maybe, let's say, Groteskir, it's well resourced, and then you do the similar research in Pelonomi, which is under resourced, and then you add two perspectives.
Thank you for that, Prof. Dr. Mohali, anything you would like to add?
Thank you, Dr. Dix. So definitely, I agree with Prof. If there is a study that has been conducted and you do feel that it can be reproduced within your specific region, or you have a similar research question, it is in fact possible to conduct a similar study, particularly if you have data available that speaks to that particular topic or area of interest. It is just important to always take cognizance of and take note of the work that has been done by our fellow researchers, just to avoid issues surrounding plagiarism, etc. But thank you.
Thank you for your insight. I don't see any more questions in the Q&A just yet. Maybe to just buy someone some time to post another question for us. I will just say that the presentation, specifically the presentation by Prof. Machitsa, will be available. We should be able to email them to everyone who participated tonight, so they will have a copy of those that they can use for their own reference. So apologies again for the technical problems there. I would also just remind everyone to fill in our questionnaire that we're doing, and also after this webinar is completed, there will be a short survey. So we would just encourage you to please complete that. Again, it really helps us to tailor these webinars so that they address some specific needs. I think tonight's topic is a very important topic. If you manage to get your research design and your research methods correct, it's essentially a copy and paste from your original protocol into your end product. And I think this is probably the most difficult thing to alter after you've started with your research. So it's easy to get right, but it's important that you get this aspect right. So I thank both our speakers for sharing their expertise on here. We have a few more questions and some comments that we'll go through. The first question from Sanel Lisiwe reads, difficult is finding a supervisor who is interested in your own research topic or idea. So most of the time it's running around trying to find someone who will be interested in the research. Is there a way of coming up with an interesting proposal in areas that interest people? Maybe Dr. Mohali, can we start with you in addressing this question?
Thank you, Dr. Dix. That is a really good question, Sunny. So in our first webinar, it was mentioned by yourself and Dr. Clary that a way in which one can sort of navigate the issue of struggling to find a supervisor who is sufficiently interested in your research, you could potentially identify supervisors who have got specific niches within the department, because different consultants or different supervisors have got different interests within our various fields. And if you can identify the supervisor whose interests most align with what your research seeks to do or what your research question seeks to answer, it would be best to then approach them and ask if they would be keen on engaging with you and supervising you in your research and guiding you along your journey, because as Prof alluded to earlier, there is a benefit for doing so in them as well. Thank you.
Prof, do you have anything to add?
Yeah. Yes, I agree with her. It may be difficult in smaller departments, but in large departments will find that there is it's people don't share the same liking or same love for the particular topic, but if you've got a bigger department, and as I mentioned earlier, you have somebody in charge overall, your head of department. If you can't find somebody who's not interested, and then if you are a specialist, let's say general surgeon, it doesn't stop you from supervising something that you don't normally do. Let's say you are in the gastroenterology and somebody come with a study of breast cancer. You are a surgeon, you've done that before. You should, and it's just if you know your research methodologies and everything else, you can still supervise that study. It doesn't, you're not, the supervisor is not limited to only his own specialty. You can do general things as well, or other fields where you don't have a liking for that particular subspecialty, if I can put it that way. So it should be, it's easier, I think, if your supervisor loves that particular aspect, but that shouldn't stop others who are not in that subspecialty to do it.
Thank you so much for that, Prof. And I think maybe even more important than finding something that your supervisor enjoys would be finding something that you enjoy. It is your MMED. After all, you will be spending a lot of time and get to know it quite intimately. So I think it is also important that it is something that you find interesting and you are willing to spend some time on. Daniel Lisiwe, I hope that answers your question. There's another question from Sarita Atarai, who says that some registrars tend to publish different aspects of one research project, I suppose, in different journals. Is this ethical? Prof, can you speak a bit about the ethics of publishing maybe slight variations of the same research being done in different journals?
Yeah, I think my feeling is that it is ethical, provided it's a general approach. Let me give an example. The study I was talking about on gender-based violence, and the statistician came in and said he wants to do the same study, but look at the statistical analysis because it's underreported. There is a formula that they use for underreported studies. So he wanted to prove that according to statistics, it's underreported, and he used those statistical words. And it's a different paper, but the same demographics, same injury pattern, but it's just looking at one other aspect of it's looking at statistical analysis. Another example will be, for example, somebody who does a study and then you realize that this study is too much for a master's. You expand the same study to a PhD. Maybe it's a novel idea, but you were doing it for your MMED. However, it's novel. It hasn't been done in that situation where you are, or anywhere in the world or in the country, and then you take it further up. Somebody can look at anatomical variations through the cadaver, for example, and then you take it up and say, I want to see on radiological grounds whether I'll find the same thing. But it's the same population, but then you're taking using radiology. So yes, it is ethical. It's unethical, obviously, to publish the same article in different journals where you haven't. There's no different perspective, but it is allowed.
Dr. Mohali, any final words from you on this or anything else?
No, I think I would just like for the take-home message to be that for us as registrars, conducting any sort of research project is completely doable, even up to the point of getting our paper out there and getting published. But the key lies in upfront choosing the right research question and following the correct methodologies and making sure that we break up our research projects into bite-sized tasks and managing our expectations realistically. But that's all for me. Thank you.
Prof, a final sentence or two before we close tonight's session.
Mine is just a concern or advice that once you have written a thesis, go a step further and publish it. Because the publication rate of MMED thesis, it's less than 30%. A good study, but at the end, it's not published. I will encourage you. You have done the work, so why don't you want the world to know about it? That will be my final say.
Thank you, Prof. I think that is something very, very powerful and very real to end on. I think we often, when we start doing research, we complain a lot, there is no data available or no published work available on certain topics in South Africa. But then you must be part of the solution. You must be part of the resources or part of the research group that are able to publish these findings so that other researchers can use it in future. And on that note, that will actually be one of our topics for this webinar. I believe on the 25th of June, there will be a session on publishing your research. But before that, in 2 weeks' time, we'll have our next session, which will be getting ready for ethics approval. So we had some ethical issues raised today already, and that should be an interesting talk. I see the chairperson of SARA, Dr. Sharon Harbour, has a hand raised. Sharon, I'll give the floor over to you.
Thank you so much, Tinas, and thank you for the great work you're doing. Just because Prof touched on publishing, I think that it's important to note. Sorry, let me just put on my video. I'm not sure if you guys can see me. Yes, I think that it's important for our colleagues to note that research waste is a thing. And even after COVID, they spoke a lot about research waste. And that speaks to researchers conducting research, but not making the research available to the public. And I think that that's something that's very important, that whether or not you find your research meaningful, it might be meaningful to someone else. So it may actually prevent someone else doing the same study because you've already established that, perhaps it's not worth it, or perhaps it is worth it. And so just to echo what Prof said is to emphasize the fact that we encourage you all to publish as much as you can. And so I think you even owe it to your participants, right? Because you're using questionnaires, using people's time, or if you're in the lab, you're using people's tissue, for example. And I think that we owe it to the people that we have conducted the research upon to make it easily available and to make it useful in society. Even if we don't think that it's meaningful, it may be meaningful to someone else. And just to emphasize again that, we have the SAMJ, we have so many journals in South Africa. So a registrar in South Africa who is conducting research, there is no reason why we cannot publish the research if they reach out to us in time where we can assist them. So that's it from me. Thanks, Tinas.
Dr. Sharon Harbour, thank you so much for that final comment. I could not have said it better myself, and I think this is a fine way to end the formalities. All that's left for me to do is to thank both our speakers. So thank you to Prof. Stephen Machidisa. Thank you to Monique Mukhlali. Thank you for sharing your expertise. Thank you for all the people from head office who keep supporting us and who were on this call as well. Zianda and the team, Renee, for helping with our technical side. And then lastly to you, last but not least, the participants. Thank you for taking your time, for spending your Tuesday evening with us. Please do remember to fill out our survey. Please look after the webinar to fill that in so that we have a bit of better information how we can best help you out. And we sincerely hope that you will join us for the next session in 2 weeks' time. That being said, I wish you all a very good night and stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you.